I am Jordan Morehouse. I am a assistant professor of strategic communication here within the Department of Communication at Clemson University. I don't know if I have a favorite, actually, now that I'm saying this out loud. I tend to utilize 4 different methods of instruction. So I lecture, students read, we view examples together, and then they do it, they create something. So maybe I guess my favorite part of that like style of educating, of teaching, is really viewing examples with students. I've learned that students really enjoy learning about my professional experience and experiences in working in industry. And so reviewing examples together gives me an opportunity to tell stories about being a public relations practitioner, or different campaigns that I used to work on, or how my boss would have responded or my clients would have responded to this example. So I guess that's probably one of my favorite things to do with students in order to engage with them, because many times they end up being shocked or surprised, or just learn through the process of reviewing examples and hearing some real stories together. I teach to help students make good ethical writing decisions. I'm really driven by helping students know the things that I didn't know when I was working in industry. I had to face so many ethical dilemmas, and it may sound really dramatic when I say it that way, but that's just the lingo I use now. But there were so many times I had to make decisions, and they were very quick decisions that I had to make, and I didn't have time to consult with people, or I didn't have time to contact my mentors and ask them what to do. And so one of the things that motivates me to teach is so that students don't have to face those problems, so that they know immediately what to do when their boss asks them to click on their own ads, or when their boss comes up with a very offensive type of campaign that they, are instructing a student to go through, to do essentially, or to manage. And so that's one of the reasons why I teach, is so that students don't have to deal with those ethical dilemmas alone, and also to provide them with a foundation of what public relations is. Many students come into my class thinking that public relations is just about gaining publicity or about crisis communication. And public relations is so much more than that. It's such an integral part of society and the way our society functions. And so educating students on that as well is a really big motivating factor, because I love seeing students get their dream jobs and achieve their career goals. That makes my heart so happy when they email me after they leave my class and tell me about how they got this internship that they were wanting, or they finally, like 5 years later, got this dream job. And so that's probably another motivating factor as well. Confidence and comfort with what they're writing and what they're drafting, and what they're asking. And also, I don't want to say professional communication skills, but that's also kind of what I'm trying to say. Learning how to professionally communicate with someone is a skill that students have to learn. And I tend to treat my students as professionals, not as students in a classroom. And so when they get that practice with me, it just helps them when they get their first internship or their first job, in order to already have that style of communicating nailed down. They've already practiced it, they already know it. And so it eases some of the stress and some of the learning that occurs when they get that first corporate job, or when they get that first job at a nonprofit organization or something along those lines. Students can succeed in my classroom by communicating with me. If any student is struggling with a concept or a theory or an assignment or something along those lines, I always ask them to please communicate that with me, because it's my job to make sure they understand the materials. And so if they don't understand the materials, that means that I'm not doing something correctly. I'm not doing my job, essentially. And so that's one of the number one things I essentially tell students and recommend to them, is that please communicate with me. I know that it can be odd to communicate with a professor, especially in the style that I prefer, which is just two professionals communicating. And I know it's always a little awkward for students to give me feedback on assignments. They've told me that, I know that it's weird. But the only way that I know if they're succeeding or not, or understanding or not, is if they tell me. And so that's one of the number one things that I recommend to students in my classes, and that I also think is really important for every student to do, is to communicate with your professor. I often schedule one-on-one meetings with students who are struggling in my classes. Sometimes they're struggling just to understand the materials, and sometimes they're struggling with other things like mental health issues or accessibility issues, or just feeling overwhelmed by the weight of everything that's happening. And so I'll schedule one-on-one meetings with them. I'll tend to start with 30-minute meetings every other week. And then if they need more meetings, then we schedule it, 30-minute meetings once a week, or if they need less, it's every other 3 weeks. And we just talk about what they're struggling with, what I can do to help them. We review the material that they don't understand, or we start drafting different goals and essentially like a protocol for what they can do to succeed in my class. I have a very specific structure for my online classes, and students have told me that that structure works it works really well for them, and I know it works well for me personally. And I have a separate structure for in-person classes that works well for students and works well for me. So I'm fine either way. I do know that when I teach online, students feel like they get to know me more. I mean, they see my office, they see my dog come in through the door. They see me laugh whenever I make a mistake or I mess up on a word or something. And so I think that's like a fun, unique aspect to teaching online. Students don't get to see my home whenever I teach in person. My dog isn't coming in and out of the classroom on campus. So that's one fun, unique thing about teaching online. Online classes have their own set of disadvantages because it's a little more difficult to get to know students. While some students do feel more comfortable in online classes speaking up and asking questions and sharing their opinions, I'm not able to see their faces and see their reactions when they're watching my video lectures. I'm not able to interact with them twice a week in person. And so that can be a little more difficult. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's harder to establish that classroom community in an online setting. I'm trying to get around that by having one-on-one Zoom meetings with students, and many of them expressed that they were really excited about that, and it was nice to actually talk back to me. A couple of them told me that they actually do laugh at my jokes, and so that was really nice to hear. But yeah, that's one disadvantage of teaching online, is that classroom community feeling. It's harder to cultivate. Yes. So I have always been a baker. I love baking cookies, cakes, brownies, etc. But I've stepped up when I'm baking. And so I've baked macaroons. I have perfected a cookie recipe after testing like seven different recipes. I'm probably the most proud by baking those macaroons though. Those were delicious. I'm looking forward to actually being on campus. This is my first semester teaching at Clemson, and so I haven't had those experiences of being on campus every day and seeing the people and seeing the buildings and going to the restaurants or cafes on campus. So I'm really looking forward to that, and just getting more comfortable with the Clemson area as well. I can't wait till I actually know the names of the streets and can easily navigate around Clemson's campus. There she is. Definitely looking forward to that. So I research public relations, and I guess a bigger way to look at that is that I research strategic communication. I tend to focus on nonprofit organizations. So in a super detailed way, I research how religious organizations and institutions practice public relations, and then the outcomes of those efforts. So I'm a multi-method scholar. I utilize interviews, content analyses, surveys, ecocentric network analyses, focus groups, pretty much anything and everything in order to examine how, religious organizations and religious publics engage with public relations materials. There were so many reasons why I wanted to come to Clemson. I mean, from the first day that the job opening came to my email, I automatically knew that this is where I wanted to be. Some of the big motivating factors were how positively everyone talks about the Department of Communication head or the chair. His name is Joe Mazer. Many faculty members were singing his praises and talking about what a great leader he is. And so that was a big motivating factor. The students were a big motivating factor. Several faculty or members of faculty were explaining to me how excellent these students are, how engaged they are, just how wonderful the Clemson community is overall. And so that was motivating. And then this may sound weird, but so I'm from Houston, which experiences historic flooding like every other year in really bad hurricanes. And so I was really excited about living in a place long-term that doesn't have natural disasters quite like that. And so South Carolina, from my knowledge, provides that. There aren't massive floods or horrible hurricanes that come through here on a regular basis. And so that was a motivating factor too. I think one of my favorite things about Clemson so far is how incredible the students are. It's not like I wasn't expecting students to be anything less than fantastic, but I've never taught students who were so engaged. Hold on, that's gonna sound terrible for my previous students. Clemson students I was just very pleasantly surprised by how fantastic they are, how engaged they are, the quality of work that they submit, their thoughtfulness and care and strategy behind their assignments. That's probably been the best surprise to date. It makes my job as an instructor so much easier when students care about the work they're submitting, when they communicate with me, when they actually try. And so that was, I've been telling so many friends and family that I have the best students. And I promise you, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. They really are incredible. And so that's probably the best surprise that's happened so far. I am really excited to tailgate and go to a football game. One of my friends in my PhD program, her name is Ashley. She is a graduate of Clemson for her undergraduate and just her undergraduate degree. She got her master's degree from UNC. But she's been telling me about the incredible football games and the incredible tailgates and how much fun they are and how the whole community gathers around the football team. And it really is like a huge event. And I haven't experienced that too much. So that's the number one thing on my bucket list. And my husband's pretty excited about that too. One piece of advice I would offer students in the Department of Communication is to read the syllabus and to communicate with your instructor. Sometimes students can feel uncomfortable telling instructors that they're struggling or that they don't understand something or giving feedback on an assignment. I know that that can be weird and uncomfortable and sometimes an awkward process, but instructors won't know that you're struggling if you don't tell them. And like even on assignments, I'll ask my students for feedback on assignments, and sometimes they'll say, everything was great, I wouldn't recommend changing anything. And even that type of good feedback is wonderful to hear because I'm always looking to improve my assignments and how I teach in my courses overall. And so good or bad feedback, I welcome it. I encourage students to give that type of feedback to their instructors as well. And just establish open lines of communication with your professors early in the semester.